I have 8:30. My name is Diane Camacho, and I'm the founder of DLC Consulting Services. We provide operational management and back office support to solo and small law firms, and my background is in managing law firms in primarily in San Francisco for about 25 years. So I've got a lot of various experience with managing all the operations for law firms. I also have with me Jennifer Connon, who is also a consultant with my firm, and she also spent about 30 years in legal management in the San Francisco area and has a very strong operational background. We also have Alex Rader with us. He's from Phoenix 2.0 Inc. And Alex has spent many years. He started out with Summation, if any of you know Summation for the litigation management software. And he's a technology consultant and management firm providing IT and cybersecurity services to various organizations. He is partnered with Ed Coria, and I know I'm butchering everybody's names. And Ed is from Sagsent Technology, and I probably butchered that name. Thank you both for being very accommodating. Ed also has a very strong background in IT. He spent 43 years, he claims that he actually puts that down, that he spent 43 years and seen computers from the punch card to where we are in the cloud. And he supports law firms and other service firms with productivity and risk reduction. Both of them have very strong security backgrounds and are very knowledgeable in the security end for software and for law firms. So I thought that they would be a great pair to bring on and to augment our operational experience that Jennifer is going to talk about with the practicality of what needs to be done for security, especially during this time now. It's been, obviously, it's a timely topic. I want to also thank Alma from the San Mateo County Bar Association. Alma and I have put together a series. This is the first of a series of operational webinars now, or they were going to be breakfasts. They may all be webinars if we move forward in the same way we are now. Our second session is on May 15th, and that is on trust, accounting, and finances. So understanding what your matrix should be and what numbers you should be looking at if you're a law firm or a small firm. And then June 11th, we have a panel of marketing professionals in different ways for marketing and branding law firms. So with all of the introductions done and the notification of things to come, we are going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have a question, please at any time just type in the chat what your question is, and then I'll be lobbing in the questions when they're appropriate for the session. The other thing that I wanted to mention is one of the requirements for this to become a CLE, give you CLE credit, is that we need to have you write down keywords that we're going to say during the session, 3 of them, and then at the end, Alma's going to send out a survey, and you're going to need to put those 3 words into the survey so that she can send you the CLE certification for your time. So that's one of the ways that they're monitoring attendance at the CLE webinars right now. And our first keyword is banana. So let's get started with our series and our information. Our agenda today is what are the requirements, what are the ABA and State Bar guidelines and requirements for law firms and software. We're going to talk about a case study and a cyber attack that Jennifer and I have a client who was attacked. We're going to talk a lot about that and how Jennifer managed to get them back on track. We're going to also talk about the things that you should know about security in the cloud, and basic information, and how IT providers judge or manage getting everything secure in the cloud. And then we're going to talk about how to choose and integrate software for small firms, solo and small firms. Everything we talk about is obviously relevant for small firms and large firms. We are targeting those folks that don't necessarily have an IT department. So they're using their managers and their IT providers as their advisors. So that's really what we're targeting, but everything that we talk about is relevant for any size law firm and, quite frankly, any size business right now in our environment. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer and we'll hit the ground running. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Diane. Pleasure to be here to talk with everybody about this very, very important matter, having gone through a very difficult time with a firm, which I'll get into in a minute. But the reason we wanted to present this to you is because it is your obligation and it is your fiduciary responsibility as lawyers to make sure that you are aware of the formal opinion 483, which addresses guidance on how you need to deal with your technology and keep your documents private and very, very secure. It's not enough just to have a system in place. You really have to plan for a possible electronic breach or a cyber attack. You need to understand how your systems are working and what you're going to do if something does happen. But this whole presentation is really to help you avoid something like that as much as possible by putting in the right steps and the right software to make sure that you minimize your risk to having any kind of an electronic breach or a cyber attack. So I'm not going to go through the rules, but the link at the bottom has all of the information, and you can find this on the ABA's guide website. It also is important that you understand as lawyers that you are obligated to manage and protect your client data. You have to be able to deal with these sorts of disasters. And when I say disasters, it also means something like if there is a power outage or God forbid there's an earthquake or floods or whatever that might damage what is going on with your data. So you really have to make sure that you understand what your obligations are and what your responsibilities are. And we are here today to help with the fourth bullet point, which is really to give you some ways to prepare in advance for these sorts of things that are happening, and then you can reduce your risk. So that is something that you should really look at and plan for going forward. So next I'm going to go into the actual story about what happened with a client of ours. I hope this really opens everybody's eyes, because this was a very, very extreme situation. I've never been through it, and we now know what we need to do not to do that or ever have that happen again. The firm that we worked with was less than 10 attorneys. They were using a provider who was managing their IT stuff. What happened was the IT provider systems were attacked by a bunch of spy bots, and they were relentless and they just didn't quit. So we literally had to shut down and unplug from the internet in order to stop them from doing any further damage. And that's what happened. It caused the firm not to have any email access for 5 days. We could not get a hold of any documents or our financial data for billing purposes and so forth for almost 10 days. And it took literally 3 months to actually restore it and put everything back together. In the meantime, they're trying to manage and balance their client interactions and correspondence and communications at the same time as we were trying to get back up and running. This definitely affected their billable hours and productivity, and it was something that we addressed when we dealt with the cyber insurance. The saving grace for them, in my opinion, from a financial standpoint, was that they had purchased cyber insurance. The premium was about $1,000, and overall the claim ended up being just north of $200,000 for just the firm itself and recreating their systems and also dealing with any business interruption. And then there was another $100,000 for the lawyers and the forensic team that had to come in and deal with that situation. So if you didn't think it would happen to you, a lot of people do not think it can happen to them. It could, and we're here to help you put things into place that hopefully will prevent it. It was one of the most stressful things I've ever been through with lawyers, and I do not wish that upon anybody.
Jennifer, if you don't mind me interrupting, I was going to say, often I see, especially in the solo law practices and the micro law practices, they're looking for a silver bullet. They think that if they buy something off a shelf, they're going to be protected. They throw around the word firewall as if it's a panacea, and they'll turn to different IT companies thinking that IT companies are all the same. The only difference is the price I'm paying. And there's a vast difference in talent. The importance of this presentation is that it's going to outline, why the things that most people think will protect them won't, and you have to think differently, because this is a perfect case. Often what you think will protect you won't.
Exactly. So during the time that we were going through this attack, we put into place some temporary measures, and that was also very stressful, having different email accounts. You had to use other cloud storage platforms to share documents. We had to store them in a situation that was temporary, however, not secure. And so we were able to get through getting work done, and it got back on track, but it was very detrimental to the firm and what they had to go through. So the story, one thing you can probably infer from this is you really need to talk about getting cyber insurance, no matter what size you are. Look at the premium was well worth what they spent for the claim that they had to and pay. And their deductible was very small, but if you didn't have it, you're looking at about $300,000 that the firm would have had to pay. And for a firm this size, it probably would have, been put them out of business, or it really would have hurt them a lot. So the next slide, we're going to have Ed and Alex talk about their process by which they go through to help clients get through this and analyze what they need for their systems to be safe.
Okay, welcome folks. Thanks for being with us. Jennifer, thank you for the impactful story there. So one of the first comments I'd like to premise this slide with is that what's good about having a decision-making framework for cybersecurity, something like this, like NIST, which is put out by the National Institute of Science and Technology. They're a department of a subsection of the Department of Commerce, so a government agency. But what happened is really early on, years ago, before ransomware and all these kinds of things became rampant, they issued guidance for privately held, non-regulated entities that they could follow for making decisions about cyber risk and cybersecurity solutions. The issue out in the marketplace was that there was a lot of guidance for regulated entities, so things like HIPAA for medical, PCI for e-commerce, the payment card industry, and FedRAMP and high trust and all these other sort of a whole alphabet soup of various compliance frameworks that regulated entities are beholden to, but there was nothing for small privately held organizations, commercial and nonprofits. So this came out early on with something like this, and it's really taken hold. So when you see guidance from the ABA about IT and cybersecurity best practices, they're typically repackaging things that NIST put out. And I think the scenario that Jennifer talked about, unfortunately, we've seen these. They are extreme, but they're not uncommon. And typically what happens, even if a firm has an IT company supporting them, is that they tend to get into this back and forth about appropriating the right amount of budget and how to pick the solution. So the IT companies, most of them, will come and say, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z because, their cyber risk is a real thing, and we need to put all, antivirus, anti-malware, firewall, all kinds of other software-based controls, etc. And they usually will get pushback from a client, whether it's a law firm or not, because the client goes, okay, you know, I haven't had this impact me yet. You're asking me to spend X amount of dollars on something that is or maybe isn't or isn't real. And so they get into this back and forth. And what something like this does is it takes that decision-making sort of responsibility off of both parties, because it's an objective kind of a framework that everybody should rely on. And what I have found is helpful about it is that they look at the life cycle that a basic cybersecurity or any IT critical event goes through, which is kind of a phased sort of a thing where there's the risk assessment itself, there's controls you put in place to protect yourself against that risk, and then mitigating actions that you can take about detecting whether there's an incident, responding to it, and then recovering and getting back to full operational capacity. So hence the 5 phases of NIST. And I'll just talk about the first one, identification.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. You finish your thought, and then I'll join in.
Well, and I think some of the language that Jennifer had on her slide from the ABA had words like respond, manage, recover, but folks often leave out the identify, detect piece, which is doing an assessment of the risks. So what are the risks for a small law firm? So you're not a Latham Watkins, or you're not, a large law firm that's handling kind of intellectual property for global businesses. So, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking you're not a target. But if you are working with an IT provider or a cybersecurity consultant who understands the landscape of the threat actors and what they're doing and why and what their motivations are, it's obviously very clear that small organizations are a very easy target for them. They're low-hanging fruit. So it's imperative to do some sort of a cyber risk assessment around what kinds of data are we holding, what kinds of things can happen that will put us in a situation where we're operating at 30-40% capacity for days and weeks. And when these things drag on for multiple days and weeks, they tend to become, they start on the spectrum of being terminal, in that clients get extremely frustrated because you're not able to conduct business. They get worried about what's happening with their data, with personal information you may be holding, et cetera. So the longer these things drag on, the more of an impact they have, both in terms of dollars and reputation. So you can kind of walk through a scenario mentally with an IT provider or cyber consultant and think about what these things could cost. And an event that lasts about 5 business days, which is 3 to 5 business days, is a time it can take to recover from a major incident. That could easily put you in the low 6 figures. So, is it worth spending $10,000, $20,000 a year on cybersecurity and IT solutions? Probably yes. So again, doing a cyber risk assessment, getting some basic training for your users in terms of interactive videos or checklists or quizzes. There's a lot of free content out there. And then maybe hiring a firm to come in and do some sort of a penetration vulnerability test if you have a physical network in an office. So things of that sort. And I'll let Ed chime in a little bit from here.
Oh, you did an excellent job. I guess some of the things I might add to this is, don't assume that if you partner with an IT firm, they're going to have the talent to do all of this. I often advocate it's a good idea to get what I call a second opinion, have somebody come in. I'd like to add the concept of security as a shared responsibility. You can't just hire an IT person and expect that everything's covered. It's your responsibility to have conversations with that person and explore scenarios. What would happen if this happened? I just read this in the news. How are we protected from that? You want to be aware, you want to be thinking ahead, and that's what this NIST thought, this outline is. It's a way of thinking. It's giving you different areas. If we think about these 5 sections in terms of your home, we might be saying, okay, let's identify all the ways that a home could be compromised. Let's identify what we have in our home that is important and could adversely affect me. When we get to the protection phase, how are we going to protect and lock our home? The detection is, how are we going to even detect if somebody gets past the protection and into our home? So often the analogy there is, oh, well, we're going to have cameras and motion detectors so that we can see if somebody gets in. Security is a multi-phased, multifaceted prospect. We can't just get a product or just an individual and assume we're protected. And that's why this NIST guideline is really important. It's less important about all the different factors within it, but those 5 phases are crucial. And then I'm sure we're going to talk about cybersecurity a little bit later, or cybersecurity insurance, but I do want to add the caveat that I consider that a critical element of NIST. Businesses need to have it, and often small and micro-sized businesses think, oh, I'm too small to be a target. Most hackers these days are not targeting individual businesses. They don't go out and say, let's get a business between X and Y. They spray the internet with various attacks or methods for attacking, and then once they get in, then they say, okay, how can I monetize this opportunity? So they don't target businesses of certain size, they target everyone, and then once they're in, they go for it. By then it's too late. It could have cost you a lot of money. Off my soapbox.
The other thing I would like to add here is that a lot of these are behavioral in nature, so there isn't necessarily a fixed dollar cost attached to them. So doing a cyber risk assessment, that could be an hour or 2 of conversation amongst the team, sitting down and just talking through various scenarios, like Ed mentioned, things you read about in the news, just kind of scale down to your size level. Writing an incident response plan, getting a template from there's, again, a lot of free content available, thankfully. Security awareness training too, there's also a lot of free content as well. Talking to an insurance broker to understand the types of cyber liability coverage that will be applicable for your firm, et cetera. So just doing a lot of the legwork, and sort of in kind of a phased fashion. I understand everybody's really busy. It's hard to take, days off and kind of dive into this stuff at first, but just doing this in incremental fashion over time, you're building a cybersecurity risk management program, quote unquote. And then,
and I was going to say, I'd also
solutions and yeah.
I'd also encourage people just to go online and Google NIST for law firms, because you'll often find numerous articles people have posted about the specifics that are good for law firms to think about. And they're usually written in layman's terms, so not a lot of technobabble. And that's a really good way to start. Alex, are you kicking this one off or am I?
No, go for it.
Okay. So when we talk about NIST, it's 110 categories or things that have to be in place. That's a lot for a small firm or just a lawyer starting out. These are the top recommendations. You want to have a firewall. Well, if you're a single individual and you've only got a computer, you want to make sure you're running a software firewall. At larger companies, this is a hardware appliance. People often think that VPN, which is a virtual private network, which I like to put in layman's terms, it's think of a straw going from your computer to maybe something in the cloud. Maybe it's your bank. The communication is encrypted, it's protected, but it's not a panacea. If you are, well, in a world we were in before COVID-19, if you were in a Starbucks working from the coffee shop and you launched a VPN from there, but you connected to their Wi-Fi, hackers often will set up fake Wi-Fis that are given the same name as the location. I've seen them in the airports and different and hotels. And you launch your VPN tunnel may flow through them. So don't assume that just because you launch a VPN, you're absolutely secure. You want to be careful about what you connect to. Endpoint protection is a fancy name for antivirus and anti-malware software that you would run on your computer. It is absolutely crucial today. I often think that antivirus and anti-malware is something that's worth paying for. I often wonder about the engineers who are writing the software when it's free. You should think the same way. Password management is absolutely crucial these days. People often come up with what they think is a good password and they use it everywhere. One of the main ways that hackers love getting in is they will compromise a individual website or entity. Let's say it's MySpace, and you use the same password there that you used on your upcoming legal documentation application. Well, they're going to scan the internet for anywhere the keys, being your username and password, also work. You just allowed them to compromise that because you weren't managing your passwords. Get a password manager. Make sure that every password you use is absolutely unique and complex. LastPass is a great start. There's a free version out there that has most of the bells and whistles. It is a great product to start with. Multi-factor authentication is the practice of not relying on just a username and a password to gain access to something. I remember about 3 years back, I stomped my foot and I said, I refuse to work with any bank entity that didn't allow me multi-factor. Now, all my banks, if I put in my username and password, they send a code to something I have, like my smartphone, and then I enter the code into the website, and that authenticates me. Almost everything today is allowing multi-factor. It's now become a standard rather than a cutting edge technology. It's something you want to adopt quickly. Disk encryption is where it comes from the concept of encrypting data when it's at rest, but I will tell you that we usually see, well, before COVID-19, when the world was normal, 2 to 3 laptops stolen a month by clients. You want the data on the laptop or the computer to be encrypted just in case somebody who isn't authorized gets access to that computer. If the data is not encrypted on the device and somebody gets a hold of that computer, it's a simple matter to see what data is there. You want to encrypt the drive. Security awareness training, Alex spoke about. I heartily encourage that. You want employees to do it. You can find free services for this online. You can also find paid services that are a bit better. You can also find simulations that will periodically send employees fake email or phishing scams just to test them, and then you can find out who isn't quite up to par with this. Cyber insurance, we've alluded to. Absolutely crucial today. It's not a matter of if you get hacked, it's when. And unfortunately, most businesses go some time before they recognize that they were hacked. The last category here is that of a BDR, or a backup and disaster recovery. A BDR is a business continuity solution. It's more than just a data backup. Let me give you an analogy. If you get one of these inexpensive cloud-based backups that's just a second copy of your data, and you have kind of a poor internet connection, or you have lots of data, it could take a long time to get that data back, getting you back in operations. A BDR solution would have the data in standby, and that BDR solution can allow you to get up and running very, very quickly. So these are the kinds of things you need to think about. Not all of them you may want to do immediately, certainly when you're just starting out or if you're a sole proprietor. But given time, as your firm grows, you're going to want to check these and more.
I have a question. So I have something called McAfee Live Scan. I feel like it's, kind of, my Live Safe. And it scans my computer. And what does that have to do with like having a quote firewall? Is there a firewall in that? How does that, for a small firm or a solo, how does that work?
Alex, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I can chime in on that. So you want to think about a firewall and antivirus, anti-malware, which you're describing, Diane. You would really want to think of them separately. What happens is you have vendors in the cybersecurity landscape that try to combine these into a bundled product because they like to capture market share and get the price point low enough so that they can, sell you this and make you feel like you're more secure because you're checking multiple boxes. The reality is, you want to think of a firewall as kind of the initial moat around your perimeter, whether that perimeter is your home network or your office network or a set of cloud apps, in which case it's a software-based firewall. It's not an appliance. The stuff like McAfee, and McAfee is okay, but they're not a leader in the space of anti-malware, which is kind of the new incarnation of antivirus software. really the malware is, it's not a traditional virus. It's really a sophisticated kind of a executable program. So it's a new class of threat. So you want to look for anti-malware utilities and see that word in product description. But McAfee is not a strong player in that space. They're okay. They're kind of the garden variety. You probably want something a little more advanced these days, and there are names that you know, if you look up Gartner that does analysis on products, you can find a list of recommended things. There's, you know, a lot of products like Sentinel One, Sophos, ESET, et cetera, that are highly specialized, and they stay in their own lane. They just do antivirus, anti-malware, and they're really, really good. So I think you want to think about them that way, and really keep those two separate.
So if I have,
I want to add.
I'm sorry.
Don't go ahead, Diane, please.
If I have Comcast Business and I have a box that they put into my house, a router, I should have that should have the firewall. Is that what I'm hearing, and not my computer?
It should have. So that router will have some basic firewall capability, but you really want an appliance behind that that's optimized for home networks, a small appliance. And especially these days when everybody's working from home, de facto now your office is in your home. So the same protections need to carry over. It's not a situation where you're just, you know, doing some work a few hours a week in the evenings or weekends. You're working full time now. If this is your office, you need to have the same protections in place. So you want to put something, you want to enable controls on a Comcast or ISP's router. You want to probably put something behind it, and you also need something on the machine. So again, it's a phased approach, right? There's controls at every path of the road. And on the machine, typically the firewalling piece is provided by the endpoint protection utility, which are these sophisticated anti-malware engines, they're called. But it's really a software that runs on a computer, and like a firewall does, it's like a toll gate at a bridge. It just checks everything that's coming in and out of the machine. Is one way to look.
And I was going to add in one of the things that we're describing a lot of different pieces of software and hardware. You might have gone to school to learn law so that you could practice law. Who wants to deal with all this IT stuff? This is why you need a competent IT person looking after that stuff, because it's pretty much a full-time job to be making sure that all these elements we have listed are working and more. And a caveat, I often see individuals at my company will quote a laptop for X price, and then they'll go out and say, oh, I found this at Costco and it was half the cost. One of the reasons you want a very powerful computer with as much RAM or memory and as fast a hard drive as you and processor as you can get is because as we begin to pile on all these applications on your computer, it's going to run slower and slower. Don't be fooled and go for the cheap computers. You need something that's powerful enough not only to run what you want to do to run your job, but to run these security protections on it. And these things can really take a toll on a processor. Another 2 cents.
The other thing that I'll add that I've learned through experience is always buy the professional version.
Yeah.
Always buy the professional version. Every time you want to do something like encrypt your disk or something like that, you end up having to upgrade your Windows or do something. And I always recommend, you know, buy the professional version. Don't.
Well, actually, related to that, I mean, Windows is available in different versions. The home version does not include BitLocker, which has the capability of encrypting the hard drive. If you get the business version of it, BitLocker's included.
Right.
You don't have to buy another product.
Exactly.
Diane, if I could maybe posit a helpful way to think about this is that security isn't, just an adjunct to any of this. It really should permeate any conversation about technology and data. So if you're, getting a new ISP, you want to ask them, you're sending me out a wireless router, what security controls are available on that thing? You're talking to Clio, right, for practice management. Clio has multi-factor authentication available from Google Authenticator or other means. So you want to make sure that you're, we're going to get down to selecting software later, that you apply the security questionnaire lens to any software product. If you're a commercial you know, a commercial litigation attorney, or even somebody that does entity formations, and you're helping a client review a contract with a vendor, that contract should talk about what data protections the vendor has in place for your client's data. So that's a security consideration. So that should always be in the back of our minds when we're thinking about technology, any piece of technology. So security is here. It's not going away. Unfortunately, it's a reality that we all have to live with. It's just another subset of risk that we need to work into our lives, just like, you know, insurance for the home, insurance for the car, medical insurance, and you know, cybersecurity is just another category of risk now that's here that we have to deal with.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to conclude the cyber attack story. First of all, the next key word is cyber. Okay. Because I like my little slide.
I liked banana.
Mine's very part of the presentation. So once we got to, we were able to get a handle on what was going on, we had to go through and rebuild our systems. And we also moved to a different third-party service provider who was able to provide just much more secure environment for the firm and a better support platform to deal with any issues that might come up. And it's something that it's a organization that Diane and I have used before, and lots of law firms have used to help them. And so that was also very helpful because we actually trusted this organization, and we knew that they were going to take care of us. They spent, we had a couple of engineers redesigning everything, and then we consolidated the type of software that we were loading, and we went from just having individual licenses for everybody, which was a nightmare to manage, to managing it by one firm account. And we also decided that we wanted to have all the hardware devices under one management solution so that they could actually do maintenance and or just look at the hardware that was being used by the different employees at the firm, also under that same umbrella. So that all worked out very well. They're running very smoothly now in the cloud, and they're very happy with their current solution. But for what happened, you know, I think this is all turned out to be a good way to have this whole awful attack resolved. Some things that we learned that I want to make sure that you think about is make sure that your IT provider has cyber insurance. That will be very helpful in the event that something happened to have them also secure and have resources. Make sure you know who is managing your domain. We had some issues with that. Make sure you have a list of all your hardware, all your software, all your licenses. That not having that in one place, central place, and located at ease was very, very difficult because we had to really literally pull it together by looking at old emails and conversations and so forth and so on. So that was also a hindrance in getting that up and running quickly. And then we also have a software that they have implemented that keeps track of all their passwords. And that was the saving grace for me to help them, is I was able to get into all their different accounts because they had that in place, which was very, very helpful. And we were able to at least get into most of the accounts and deal with changing passwords and things like that going forward. You know, some of them out there that I've heard of, Norton has them, PassPack, you know, LastPass, which was mentioned before. There's different types of software, but it is something that you want to have instead of a piece of paper like I have with everything written down on it. And a lot of these software programs too will generate the passwords for you, and they're much more complex and secure than you would have making them think yourself. One of the things we did discover, and you guys mentioned, Alex and Ed mentioned earlier, is we had employees using passwords that they were using on a personal level. So there in itself is a huge problem. You're using a password to your bank or to get into your Amazon account, and they were using that same thing to log into different programs that they were using at the firm. That's a big no-no, and don't do it, because we're not sure how things happened, but it could have been an email, a phishing email, or whatever the case is. But that's just the recommendation, is to change those often and do that and not use the same passwords for everything. So the firm, in the end, this is what we had to add to their platform and their plan in order to make them secure. So these are all the things that they didn't have before this all started. And so the firewall was increased, was added when we changed over to platforms. They had really serious malware and antivirus programs installed. Password management was something that we instilled in everyone's brain. We also added the multi-factor authentication. And that was hard for this firm, because they've never had to go through these sorts of processes. And they said, you know, I have to do this every single time I log in. Yes, you have to do it every single time you log in. There's a reason for it, and it's going to protect you from what happened to you earlier. So there was a little bit of pushback from that, because it was a small firm. You know, they just want to make things easy and not, you know, leave their computers up and running all the time and leave their programs open and so forth. And so that's where the education came in, and we really had to sit down with them and say, this is how you do it. When you're done for the day, you log out of your programs. You want to make sure that you do that, because the third-party provider is going to reboot your computer, make sure their updates are applied, and that you're protected. So it was really, we had to train them and get them to rethink how they actually work and use their systems to do their job. And then lastly, we did apply a few programs to help with business continuity if something happened in the future. One of the things that they did was they added some software that would allow them to get their email back up and running quickly if for some reason maybe the third-party provider server farm went down. From a power standpoint, they could still get their emails, which was number one, the most important thing for them going forward. So all of this we did, and now they're in a much better place. But I think if you take nothing away from this, they learned their lesson, and they understand the value of having a secure platform and server and using resources. It might cost a little bit more money up front, but in the end, it's not going to cost you, hopefully, $300,000 to fix things. Any other comments you want to make, Ed or Alex?
Well, I was going to add, with regard to the multi-factor authentication, one of the most important things you can do around that is on your email. Now, almost the vast majority of business people I see, they either have their email now at Microsoft with Office 365 or at Google with Gmail. Both of those services offer multi-factor authentication for the email free. All you have to do is go through the steps online. Hacking one's email has gotten to be extremely easy. And when you add multi-factor authentication to an email, it doesn't mean you're going to have to put in a code every time you send an email. What you do instead is you authenticate a device. So I might have my home computer authenticated, my laptop authenticated, and my smartphone authenticated. But if somebody shows up on Microsoft's Office 365 and said, "Hi, I'm Ed Correa. I'm now getting email here," they're going to send it a code to something I have and say, "Hi, Ed, we're authenticating your new computer." And I'm going to, I didn't do that. So they never get the code, they can't get in. So that is a really, really good thing to do on your email today.
Okay. Next slide. So I'm going to go through this it's a very basic way to determine how you're going to choose cloud software. And Alex and Ed are going to put in their input about when you're doing this, what you're also going to do from a security standpoint as you look through, depending on what kind of software you're adding. It could range from your operating system to your billing system to what your email, what you're using for email. But when you are considering cloud software, it's really important that you look at the firm, the firm statistics, the staffing that you have, and your clients, because those are going to determine what's the best thing for you to purchase or utilize. The size of your firm is important because smaller firms, there's a lot of software out there that's targeted for them as opposed to larger firms. So you're going to want to make sure that when you're looking, that the product is going to satisfy something that you can do on a smaller level and not overwhelm you because it's so complicated. You also want to make sure you understand the age of your attorneys. We work in a multi-generation workforce these days, and everyone has different approaches and different ways to do things, so you need to understand that. Working in the cloud is not difficult, but it is something that some people who have always just gone into the office and never had to do something from home have a hard time doing. So you want to make sure you address and make sure that software is going to work for those folks who are not used to it. In the same vein, the mobility needs of the software are very important because everyone wants to be able to do things as they're going. And sitting on the train, working and going in an Uber, they want to be able to do things as they move around. And you just want to make sure that the firm is looking at what's the priority for them, what do they need, and what's important to the firm from the software standpoint for their users and the people in the firm. And then your staffing, how many people do you have that you have to get software for? Are there only billers, or do you have also administrative people? And what kind of tasks are they going to be doing? Litigation tasks are going to be different than your corporate tasks. You're going to have immigration is going to be very different than maybe employment. So you want to make sure that you understand who's using the software and for what reasons, so that you get the right kind of resources to help you with your work. And you want to decide of the staff who's doing what. Are they drafting things? Are they going to be billing? Is it case management? Are you going to be filling in forms online, which would dictate what kind of Adobe program that you're going to have? Are you using calendar management? There's all sorts of things like that would probably in a litigation firm you would need that kind of thing. Now, your clients, you want to understand how you're going to serve them. That's why we're here. And a lot of them now, especially if you have clients that are in the banking or the healthcare field, they require that you have a system or software that would allow you to protect and make sure that the HIPAA laws are going to be covered. You want to make sure that you have the ability to send encrypted emails and things like that to your client. Can they receive those? Are they able to actually open up something like that? Do they have the capabilities of doing that? You also want to look at what their expectations are as far as how you're going to send their data and where their data is going to be stored. Many banks and now have audits done, and you have to be able to tell them that you have the data secure and how it's secure. So, and also the type of client. A client who is going to be receiving very sensitive data, maybe from an employment firm with social security numbers and medical data, you have to be able to understand that your clients need that to be protected. And so these are all the different things you're going to want to consider when you are looking for software that you're going to use in the cloud. Any comments from Ed or Alex?
Alex, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think also writing the requirements, or at least kind of considering them And how this, whatever new software is, fits into the existing environment. So for example, if you're doing manual entry now at any point throughout the data flow of the organization, is that, are you okay with continuing to do data, doing manual entry? What does this software have to solve for? Is it supposed to eliminate, some kind of bottleneck or gap in the way you work? So, thinking about the requirement that way, can you access data remotely in this application? So, with most cloud software, the answer is yes. But again, what controls or you have to have in place if you're logging in remotely? Should you be doing that through VPN? Should you have multi-factor authentication on? And what functionality does the software have to solve? Just like with, firewalls and VPN and all these other things, we tend to want software that does most of the things in one kind of suite, and it's difficult. So, is it supposed to do time slips or billing or calendaring or client documents or docketing, et cetera? Kind of, again, what are the requirements? And then having somebody to bounce those off of. So whether it's your IT firm who understands the technology in your organization can think about the implications of adding this software to the environment. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad I let you go first because it took a few off my list. One thing I'd like to suggest are two things. First, what is the reputation of the software? Get a couple, maybe three companies that are very from the vendor and talk to them. See how this is working for them. You really want to make sure before you go adopting a new software platform that it's going to work for your business and people can tell you how it's worked for them. Also, don't hesitate to ask about how was the support when things went wrong. Things go wrong with everything. How a company supports you when things are going wrong is really crucial. Finally, if things don't work out, how easy is it to get your data out of it, particularly with data in the cloud and many of these cloud providers. It's kind of a one way. It's not easy to get the data out. So that's a good question to ask. We just want to make sure you're making the right choice going into it.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
There's a question, it looks like, from Michael. It says, what should we expect to pay and how are charges calculated? So quickly, I will say that cloud software has a billing model that it seems to be kind of ubiquitous, where it's a per user per month fee, right? It's a per seat per month kind of a charge. So, and usually it's small. It's, like with Office 365, it's $5 or $10 a user a month, but that can quickly add up, and they will make up any discounting that they give you on licenses with fees for data storage. So if you're using their cloud to store the bulk of the data, for example, and monetizing other aspects of your interaction with the software. So you really, as Ed mentioned, you want to read their service level agreement and understand what are their data retention policies, what's the pricing structure based on, if there is some sort of an incident, what protections they have in place for their cloud infrastructure, et cetera. So things like that. There are standard questionnaires that you can find online or ask one of us, and we could send you that you can kind of put them through the paces and get a sense of how they're doing these things.
I wanted to add another caveat on the thought of cloud software versus something you're going to install on site. Back in 2008, when the cloud was just beginning to get going, I was of the thought, it was incorrect, that a box product that I would buy and then use for several years would be a better investment. It was a capital investment, but I could then lower the cost over the many years. The challenge is today with hackers, they are targeting any software of any age. And the older the software gets, the more they know about the vulnerabilities and the more they're going to leverage the software. I'm a firm believer today that software as a service in the cloud is the way to go, because those things are updated for you, they're maintained for you. Yes, you're paying every month, but when we aggregate the total value that you're getting versus buying a product and just implementing it, the cloud software as a service is much better for most businesses. You're shifting that capital expenditure to an operational expenditure, and you're getting much more for your money. So don't be put off by the cost per person per month. There's a lot of value there.
Also, I'd like to add that if I take my business as an example, I operate just like a law firm. We manage law firms. That's what we're comfortable with. So we have very similar software needs. We have the practice management software. We have a document management software. We have PDF. We have Office 365. And for my firm, it costs about $250 per user per month for my software. So I look at that and I say, okay, well, how many hours of billable time do I need to collect in order to take care of that particular one more user and have them be state of the art, have the most current information, have it most secure? And I think that, for me, it's a little bit more than, a billable hour. For many of you, it might be, it might be a little bit higher. You might have legal research costs that you need to add in there and other specialized software for your practice. But if you look at it and you say, okay, well, it cost me, 5 hours for the 5 of us to have state-of-the-art software, that's money well spent. So I encourage you to find out what it costs you per user per month, and then decide if that's a valuable expenditure.
There was a question from Michael. Should we still keep data on our servers or portable media? So to our point is that if you're a smaller firm these days and you still have remnants of servers that were a necessity in years past, you want to try to move off of those, because the vendor landscape for software is such that they all have a cloud-based offering these days. Most of them do. So you want to get on that path. But to the extent that you have physical appliances, whether they're servers or storage attached, kind of storage devices, network attached storage, etc., you need to have multiple copies of any data that you consider important. And the question there becomes, if something happens to the original copy, how quickly can I get the backup in place and get operational with it? So, and that's your recovery time objective, which is kind of a state-of-the-art IT data recovery term. And that'll tell you, what you need to have in place. So most businesses can go, hours or maybe a day or two without, having data right at their fingertips. You could probably recreate files, et cetera, from attachments in email. You could have a colleague send them to you. But if it starts to go on more than a couple of days, it really becomes extremely painful. So you want to have that in the back of your mind. So you're going to have a secondary appliance somewhere that you're keeping off site, et cetera. You need to be able to put that thing into production as soon as possible.
And I was going to add, if you are using, you're doing your own data backups, it really needs to be automated. It can't be a manual process, because you won't do it. You're going to be busy. And I can't tell you how often we're called in after the worst happens at some company, and we're going, well, you have a backup process. Oh, yes. When was the last time you did a backup? Oh, a few months back. Or the other caveat is, since Michael mentioned portable media, it reminds me of a horror story. Most small and micro companies will get a single hard drive portable media, or a smart stick, USB stick, and they'll put their data in, and something happens to that portable media. Often the hard drive dies, and they don't know that it's dead until they need the data. And I've seen the smart sticks go bad as well. Those are not reliable backup methods. Again, something like going to the cloud that's automated would be much, much better.
The other thing that I'll add in connection with having a server for small firms, not a lot of times, but I know of software that is very common in the legal industry that doesn't have a cloud version. So in order to appease the staff or to appease some of the attorneys, you keep a server for those particular software products. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage you to not. I would encourage you to either really force the software to think about going to the cloud, or find something that is in the cloud for the small firms. Again, it's a vulnerability spot. Once they get into your server, they can get into other things. And I don't think it's worth the risk in order to have somebody have the software that they like. There's many, many software products out there. We're going to give you a list at the end of this of different software for different types of work in a law firm. And there are products that will handle the needs of a law firm in the cloud.
It's at 9:30, so let's move through the rest of the presentation and then we can take more questions. There's a few that are on the chat group. And the next step that when you're evaluating, I'm going to go through this pretty quick, but when you are evaluating software, and again, there are people who can help you do this, you want to, first of all, review the vendor's site really, really well. Talk to your peers, talk to your peer firms and your colleagues about what they're using and what they find is good for them and their practices. You know, Google searches can give you lots and lots of information. YouTube has a lot of information, and you can actually watch these and see what the product does and how it might fit into what's best for you. Consultants can do a lot of this legwork and then present you with options about what you might want to do going forward if you don't have the time. Again, when Diane was explaining the cost of things and the billable hour, a lot of this can be done by people at a much lower rate, and you can continue billing your time. The demonstration of whatever you're going to be looking at is really, really important. A lot of times they say software will do this, that, and the other, but you need to push them and have them actually show you what the results are of a report, or if you enter this, what does it look like? Just don't take their word for it, because a lot of times the software does the things, but it doesn't have the result that you're looking for and what you wanted it to do. And then there's a way to take all of the information and put it on a list, and then have all of your different features that that are important to you and you want to cover, and then you can have all of your different software options, and then fill in the gaps and see what turns out to be having the most opportunities for you to do what you need for your firm. We have a system that we use to do that, and that's what we would present to our clients. The next slide is something that I wanted to show everyone. These are features that are most commonly used in law firms that you would want to look at to get your practice up and going, that have cloud-based systems. It's going to be your intake system. You're going to make sure that it's HIPAA compliant. You may have special needs depending on your practice. Like I was saying, you may need to have a calendaring system that works with your Outlook or whatever, your billing system or your case management system. What's also very important is that the software has the ability to do things on a mobile phone. I know when we talk to a lot of clients, the lawyers want to be able to enter their time and do things while they are traveling to work or sitting in an airport. These things are very important, so they can just keep going and doing those things on their phone if they don't have, or even their laptop. And then the last two are really the software that you're looking for, maybe from a case management standpoint or document management standpoint, integrates with your billing system and can use those billing numbers that you've already created and so forth. So those two systems can talk to each other and sync. And then the last thing we've talked about before in the past is having the software, the ability to secure transfer with your clients. It could be uploading something. I know there's a lot of systems that I've used with my financial advisor. They send me stuff that's secure. Is that important to your practice? Maybe for an estates lawyer who is transferring wills and very, very delicate information back and forth with their clients. So those are some things to consider as far as when you're looking at software. On the next slide, what Ed and Alex are going to do is talk to you a bit about, if you're going to look at all these different software and look at these systems, make sure you're also, does it play well with others? And when we mean others, we mean security.
Well, I don't know that there's that much to stay here. It is a process. This is best done by somebody other than yourself. it's a great aspect to bring in somebody who can consult and has the expertise to know about how things work. But certainly, what is it going to be compatible with? What is it going to be uncompatible with? And then how are you going to secure it? So it tends to be different advice you need. Certainly Alex and I would be great for the security aspect, but Diane's company is going to tell you how it's going to function and connect with all of your other applications, which is crucial, that those tie-ins and connections.
Yeah, I think we've sort of touched on this in pieces on the other slides, but again, it's having the security as part of your rationale for evaluating any software, or in this case software, but really anything else that plugs into the technology in the firm. And so it's thinking about, what kinds of concerns should we be keeping top of mind. So there are questionnaires available online. So Google's a great resource. Honestly, I will tell you that IT folks use Google religiously, because there are very few issues regarding software, data, or technology that have not occurred to someone else, and all of this stuff is documented online. So you can quickly Google a product and say security considerations for practice management software, and you'll find documents, many of which actually the ABA or other governing bodies put out. So there's a lot of good content online. I would just take the time to read up a little bit, and then you'll know what kinds of questions or concerns to think about, and do it in concert with your IT provider or some technology consultant. Everybody should have a relationship with somebody who supports technology at your firm, whether it's a solo consultant who you use on a fractional basis, or a firm, but somebody that you can rely on the way we all rely on attorneys and CPAs and financial advisors. So I think that's key in this day and age. It's impossible to really function without having some backup on the technology side of things. So, and don't abdicate the responsibility to them completely. I mean, be an informed consumer, so your practice and what you need operationally. So talk to Diane or Jennifer, and then talk to somebody who can answer and look at the technology considerations.
The other thing that I'll add here is there's a lot of software that is they have a relationship with the bar, or they have a relationship with your local women's organization. Those relationships, that does not mean that software has been vetted by anybody. What it means is that they've paid the Bar Association to have their logo on the website and have agreed to give the members a discount. So again, it may not work for you. It may be a perfect fit for you and your firm and your practice, but however, it may not be. So be careful, and don't save $1 to spend 10 because it takes you longer to do something, or you can't do it, or it doesn't work for something else. So I just encourage you to be very careful when you're looking and kind of jumping into sponsored, or however I don't know exactly how they word their relationships with the bar associations and whatnot, but that doesn't mean that the Bar Association has vetted them or in any way recommended them exclusively. I'm sorry, Alex.
Oh, I was just making a joke. I said they word them very carefully. So,
yeah.
Okay. Questions? You can type them if you like. If it's easier to just say them, you can unmute yourself and do that as well. Diane, don't forget to do the last keyword.
Thank you very much. The last keyword is space.
Well, everyone, thank you very much. I don't see any questions coming. We are very honored to have been able to present to all of you, and we hope you can take away some very valuable information to make sure that you keep your systems secure. I don't want anyone to have to go through what the firm I worked with did. So if you have any questions at all, please reach out to any of us. We're here to help you. We want you to be safe, and we want you to be secure. Michael, the last keyword is that you have to have 3 keywords in order to answer your survey when you get MCLE credit. So you can get MCLE credit. So with that, I think we're done, unless anybody else has some parting words.
I'd like to again let you all know that we have 2 more sessions planned with the San Mateo Bar Association. And if these our sessions are of interest, the first one is May 15th, and it is a trust accounting and finances session. So we're going to talk about the numbers that a law firm should be looking at. This isn't your profit and loss statement and things like that. These are specific for law firms to evaluate profitability. And then we're going to cover trust accounting and the best practices for trust accounting. And then on June 11th, we're going to have a panel with marketing professionals from branding to SEO. So I encourage you to join us for those. They are going to also offer CLE credit. And then at the after this session is over, Alma will be sending out a copy of the PowerPoints and a list of the software that we've put together, that DLCCS has put together, that is just here's 3 different things that do document management. So it's not an endorsement of any software. It's a list of software that you can look at and gives you a starting place to make some decisions. And any of us from this call are more than happy to talk to you in more specifics. And we wish you all well and healthy for the next little month. And hopefully we don't all go crazy.
Thanks for
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.